Alex, every man out there is chasing every new hack from cold plunge, red light, stem cells, nootropics, but very few have heard of hydrogen. Are we chasing the wrong things? And in your opinion, what makes hydrogen such a critical piece of the puzzle?
I wouldn't say we're chasing the wrong things, but we might be looking at a lot of it from the wrong perspective. Um, a lot of what you mentioned there are really beneficial in a lot of certain ways. None of them are magic bullets. None of them are miracles. They're all stressors, except I think maybe you said peptides, which are repair mechanisms. But the cold plunge, red light, hydrogen, they're all stressors that we evolved to experience that make us stronger in the right dose. And when they're absent, they can make us weaker. And the way we're looking at it wrong is what I would say protocols. And it's human nature to try and find the right protocol. But
Mm-hmm.
the most common stressor that we know would be exercise. And you're not going to tell your 80-year-old grandma to do the same exercise as you do a 20-year-old Olympian, for instance. And that's the same with everything, with exposure, with red light therapy, with hydrogen. Um, Anything that is a stress that drives an adaptation, um, we're going to need to, in the future, be looking to customize a dose to the individual, right? Where are you hitting that stress adaptation window, and where is it pushing to too far? And one of the interesting things about hydrogen, um, now it is best described as a hormetic stressor like the rest of them, but it is a little bit different. It's something I'd call an anticipatory stress, right? So I have a hypothesis on this that I'll get into in a bit, but it activates a lot of the same stress pathways that something like exercise or fasting or cold exposure or heat exposure or red light therapy does. Uh, but it doesn't lead to acute extreme stress when you overdose it like the rest of them. It's the mildest stress out of any of them with an oversized response. So it's like our body thinks we're about to have a major stress event. So it activates to protect and repair, but then that never comes, right? So we just get the repair mechanisms without the stress. Um, Now, when we think about hydrogen, we have to really go back to the very beginning of evolution. And our last universal common ancestor, the single celled organism, which spawned all life on this planet, um, consumed hydrogen as its fuel source from volcanic vents, right, is our understanding. Then there's the hydrogen theory of hydrogen hypothesis of mitochondria, which came from eukaryotes, which was kind of a handshake deal between a couple of organelle, one of which expelled hydrogen as a waste product. So hydrogen has been with us for a couple steps before our mitochondria. And now we have carried that through us, through all of evolution, and we've evolved to produce tremendous amounts of it endogenously, so internally in our body. The challenge is the way we evolved to do that is a manner that we are not currently getting to the extent that we did throughout the majority of human evolution up until like the last 10,000 years. And that is by fermenting fiber, right? Non nutritive carbohydrates. We have bacteria in our small intestines which ferment fiber, produce tremendous amounts of hydrogen gas. Now, up until the last 10,000 years with horticulture, we purposefully stripped fiber from all our food sources because it's difficult to eat. That's led to other problems. Like the reason that we don't have straight teeth anymore is because our jaws are weaker because we're not gnawing on this fibrous food anymore. You look at ancient skulls and they have straight teeth because of the strength of the jaw from all that chewing. Uh, we would have consumed 100 to 150 grams of dietary fiber a day back in those times. So we were producing tons of hydrogen gas. Today, they recommend 30 grams, but the average person is getting 10 to 15 grams of dietary fiber a day. So 1/10 what we used to get. But people on a standard American diet, for instance, a fast food diet, they might get 0 to 3. So they're getting none or basically none. And bacteria are living things. And like any living thing, if you stop feeding it, it will die. And when these hydrogen producing bacteria die off, something called a different bacteria come over. They're called methanogens, and they produce methane gas. Now, methane is just a waste product that has no role in our body. Um, in fact, and this is just correlation, so we don't know it's causative, but there are strong correlations. Methane is correlated with all-cause mortality, basically every chronic disease. And actually, we know in following, say, centenarians in Okinawa, Japan, so people over 100 years old, uh, these centenarians have higher levels of breath hydrogen and lower breath methane than younger people, even their direct descendants who are 30 years old, for instance. So that's really telling about how their lifestyle maintained that ability to produce hydrogen gas. um, Now, to get to what I mentioned about the anticipatory stress and why uh, hydrogen doesn't have, say, the same problems of overdosing, at least not yet that we're aware, as exercise or cold or heat. You get too much of any of them and it can make you really ill or even kill you, right? With hydrogen, it seems the higher we've gone in dosing, the stronger the results. Now, this is conjecture, but it makes some sense from an evolutionary standpoint. Um, in our hunter-gatherer days, when we failed to, say, kill an animal and get sufficient, calories from said animal, we would have been trying our best not to die of starvation. So we would have been shoving as much plant-based foods down our throats as we could find, which means in those times leading to starvation, we would have gotten much higher levels of hydrogen gas, which could answer the question of why it is triggering these stress pathways without actually inducing the stress that other hormetic agents do. So that's kind of my hypothesis on the subject. Is it's an anticipatory form of hormesis. Our body goes, oh, holy shit, we're getting all this hydrogen, we're about to starve, and triggers all these pathways that are the same as fasting, caloric restriction, cold exercise, all of these things. And our body basically mobilizes to protect against an imminent stress that doesn't come. But we do have daily stressors that are cumulative. And we know that these daily stressors compound, they accumulate, and we drift away from proper function, homeostatic function, slowly every day, right? As our bodies break down in entropy. So hydrogen is kind of staving that off by tricking our body into thinking a major stress is coming. Is my hypothesis. Um, there's interesting research in, say, fruit flies, which shows that when you starve them to death, if you give them hydrogen water as they're starving to death, they survive substantially longer as they're reacting to this lack of nutrients and calories and preserving themselves.
There's so much there for us to unpack, and I think where I want to go first is this word stress. It came up throughout that entire response, and I know this. I've spent my life in the health and fitness space, and have looked at a lot of these things through the lens of, like you said, the acute stressors, because I know that's where the strength is going to be found. But I think for a lot of people, when they're seeking these hacks, whether it's the plunging, the sauna, like, they're not seeing it as a way to stress themselves. They're actually seeing it as a way to not do the harder thing, which is the exercise, which is the most difficult stress. So there's a general population, or just society in general, like, do they have a misunderstanding of the role stress plays in optimization?
I think they do. And um, we talked about offline. My book comes out in the next couple of days. It's just being uploaded now. My first book, I've written 8 now, so it's my first of 8. It's called Stress Hacked: How to Get Stronger in a Civilization Designed to Break You. And the word hack is in there ironically. And the first page actually says that, that strength is not a hack, right? It's a journey that you need to get to, every day over time. And this book is very long. It's something like 240,000 words. So I think it's like 700 pages for the mind and the body. It's deep in science, deep in philosophy, um, because that is what strength is built on, that journey and that commitment to endure and to grow stronger and to do it with intent, intentional. Um, there are no shortcuts in any of this. It comes from understanding and it comes from committing. And it's one of those problems I see. And the more I say this, certain of my friends in the industry, customers, and such, will probably get mad at me because it's what people want. So it's what they give them. But to me, and there's a lot of medical doctors doing this too, which drives me insane. Those who would recommend a universal protocol stacking multiple hormetic stressors to all people always are demonstrating that they don't know the first thing about hormesis and stress, right? Um, like I said offline, you wouldn't tell your 80-year-old grandma to do the same workout as a 20-year-old Olympian. That's insane. Um, we all respond to different hormetic stressors, whether it's red light therapy or sauna or cold, or exercise or hydrogen even, different. But not only that, we're going to respond to these stressors differently as individuals, depending on what our stress load is each and every day. So the same protocol that worked for us last week might not work for us next week, depending on what's going on. I think the future is in wearable technology. They're not there yet. We can see trends and adjust and go off feeling right now, but maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to be getting real time data off our wearables where we can cut or lengthen our subjecting ourselves to a stress to stay in that adaptation window and not push past into just acute damaging stress.
I think one of the things that I'm hearing, and this makes your messaging different than a lot of people in this space, is you're coming out of the gate telling the truth. You even mentioned it. A lot of marketers, biohackers will sell pills, potions, solutions, red light therapies as like the solution, and people are looking for the hack, right? Biohack, like the short fix that's going to fix things. And I've studied marketing. I've spent the last decade in the internet space, and I had a mentor early on say, your goal to be a successful marketer is you have to sell the person what they want, and then on the back end deliver them what they need. And it's like your message is the opposite. It's like you're telling people up front, like, this is a journey. Like, strength is not a hack. Like, you're even saying, hey, I wrote a 700-page book. Like, nobody wants to read 700 pages. They want 7, right? They want a 7-minute podcast that they can listen to that's going to deliver all the solutions.
And I actually think that is one of the big problems plaguing society. Uh, it is people want easy answers. They want magic solutions, right? From, say, a financial standpoint, people want to go to bed poor and wake up rich without having done any work. They want to go to bed unhealthy and wake up fit without having done any work. Um, I could invent, and I couldn't, but say I invented a magic, you know, pill that you drop in water and tell people, listen, you drink this and you're going to wake up like you drink this every day, and slowly in time you're going to become incredibly wealthy. It's going to make you gorgeous. You're going to be fit. Your IQ is going to go up. The list goes on. If it wasn't like easy to do and didn't taste like Coca-Cola, the majority of people wouldn't do it, right? They'd be like, ah, that's too much. That doesn't taste good. Because people want easy answers, easy solutions. So that is what most marketers give them. Um, and so I had to think, am I prepared to do that? And I'm not, right? Because there has to be in marketing, there has to be a level of ism. I'm sold myself. And if I don't believe what I'm saying, I can't look people in the eye and say it. So I had to commit that I'm talking not to the many, but the few. And from my perspective, if the few who are willing to listen and understand truth and what is needed, if they start leading the way, then in time, a wave of the many, one wave at a time, will start joining them, right? And we'll kind of get back to our roots in understanding that life isn't easy, it's struggle, right? Everything doesn't come pre-packaged in an immediate solution, right? You can't walk into the doctor's office at 60 years old, 400 pounds, and say, give me a pill to fix all my problems. That's just not reality. And it will never be reality.
And this requires a fundamental shift in people's philosophical perspectives of what the meaning of life is. It's not outcome based. And maybe we can get a little bit into your story and journey here, because I know you went through a major crisis yourself, which has led you down this path of all this work that you're doing. But there's a reason why lottery winners go bankrupt in 2 to 5 years. They were given all the wealth, but they didn't become the person that could manage it, right? Self-development guru, I think it was Jim Rohn, said, you don't set the goal to become a millionaire to make $1 million. It's the journey of becoming the person that can do it. So I think a lot of people had a misunderstanding of the meaning of life, thinking outcome based versus the process and the journey of who it is they're becoming.
100%. And you look at outcomes, and what does that outcome mean? Will that make you happy today? Maybe you think you want that today, but by the time you get there, you're not the same person, right? We're the culmination of our genetics and all of our lived experiences. And we're not the same. You and I are not going to be the same people after this recording as we were before it, because this conversation will have affected us in an indeterminable amount. So we're this constantly evolving sphere of our biology, neurobiology experiences, and they're all interacting with each other onto who we're going to be in the next moment. And so that's why just getting this, winning the lottery or something, you haven't experienced that journey, right? You don't know what to do with it, right? And if you're looking at things from an outcome perspective without looking at how to get there, well, you don't know what your journey is going to be. You might not want that outcome, right? And I've actually, it's funny you say this. That there's another work in one of my books I'm using on these thoughts, because the prevailing philosophy behind most actual philosophies, whether religious or not, is always outcome based, right? And it's often not journey based, but the journey is who makes us us, right? And even if, say, you think of a concept like heaven, well, what is that? That's going to be different for every person, right? So that's and what that is going to be based on your journey and how you behave in the moment. What paradise would be to you, right? And it wouldn't be the same for me and you, or any other person you ask, right? So we need to start thinking of the moments. People look into the future and they look into the past, and the past makes them upset, and the future, if the future is not backed up by the moment, will cripple them, into this illusion. Well, I'll be here in the future, but they aren't focusing on what they do. Um, when we focus on the moment with some loose aspirations of the future, we're able to rewire our trauma of the past, right? Because our trauma of the past is what brought us to this moment. And if in this moment we have purpose and we're fulfilled, then our trauma was actually only beneficial to get us here. It's part of who we are, But if we are looking to a future that might never arise, and then looking back to the past at everything that has been wrong to us, we're paralyzing ourselves in the moment and we're not acting.
Bringing back the stress. It's interesting, we're going down this conversation because I think one of the things that keeps a lot of people from being present in the moment is the ability to manage and regulate their autonomic stress. A lot of people are stressed financially. They're hijacked by social media. They're looking at all the political chaos in the world. So they're living in this constant state of autonomic arousal.
And most of that's intentional, and yeah.
For sure. So how can we utilize these hormetic stresses to help us better regulate the internal stresses or the external vices that are causing us to feel the stress and not be present in the moment?
My strategies might not work for everyone, but they work for me, right? So for all this chaos um, that you describe in the world, these are actually the subjects of many of my books, right? So in the 8 books that are either um, so out of my 8 books, the one is releasing this week. Another is 90% finished. It will be done in about 6 weeks. Two more have everything written and they just need editing. So it'll be a wrap schedule. And then 4 others are maybe 75% done. But they kind of lead down this journey. The first 2 books are about strength, in body and mind. And then the next 2 are about the information war and what is going on social media, AI, politics, academia, everything like that. And just to get it out of the way, I don't actually believe in conspiracy, right? People aren't sitting in dimly lit rooms smoking cigarettes talking about how to control humanity. That's just not what's going on. I believe in emergent conspiracy and tacit collusion. So basically, what ends up happening is everyone is following their own will to power, and when things start working, right, those at the top recognize what is working for their competitors, and they all start aligning because it works. And all of these systems we have in place are built one decision at a time, billions of individual decisions that all benefit that person at the top until it appears to be a conspiracy because everything converges in straight lines because it works, and that hijacks the general population in a certain way that benefits power, and the regulations and the laws and lobbying and everything like that all continues to solidify that these power dynamics at the top. But first, we have to get strong. Then we have to understand what's going on. To me, understanding what's going on reduces the stress of it, right? Because now you can get over the anxiety of this chaos and think, okay, well, this is going on. I understand it. Now, what are the solutions? And you can start thinking solution forward. So after I go there, I go into some of the bigger culture wars. There's 3 books on a few of the culture wars going on, with solutions on how to navigate. And I'm a big believer, and I have like what I'll call burner accounts on social media that follow extremist groups on every side, because I firmly believe that we can't have dialogue and conversations unless we understand where people are coming from, right? We need to see what reality they're seeing, see what their pain is, and understand what they're getting right and what they're getting maybe horrifically wrong. And if we can't see what they're seeing to put ourselves in their shoes, we can never bridge gaps of dialogue. And then my final book gets into your last point, and it's about finance and the illusion of money, which doesn't, it's not real, it's not tangible, it doesn't exist. You look at what real wealth is on this planet. It's natural resources, manufactured resources, and human resources. If any of those were gone tomorrow, we wouldn't have society. If all the dollars on the planet were gone tomorrow, there'd be confusion, but we'd figure it out another way, because it doesn't actually affect real wealth. Our real wealth is what's on this planet and our knowledge of what to do with it. Um, so that brings me a lot of calm and clarity in my writing projects. But on a daily matter, that might not. And these thoughts have to emerge from a place of clarity. And I do certain things. I'm not a big believer in, say, following a meditation app and forcing yourself into meditation. I think that defeats the purpose of what meditation is supposed to be, which is being completely present and without thought, and then from that place, clarity emerges. So I like doing certain repetitive tasks that I ensure to do every day. I walk through the forest and I just immerse myself in the sounds and the colors of nature, until all my anxiety is gone. And then I'm not thinking about anything until a thought emerges, and I have some revelation. Um, I do the same thing. And I'm someone who's incredibly busy. I work 100 hours a week. I have a driver, so I can work in transit. Um, I am working by 5:30 in the morning and still working at 11 p.m. as I fall asleep, usually with my phone or a book in my hand. Um, I, but yet every day I cook, and I go through the process, chopping vegetables, cutting meat, everything like that. I'll usually put on some introspective music, and the mundane repetitiveness of cooking when nothing is on your mind again, that acts as a period of focusing on the moment and emptying my mind, because if you're overthinking things while you're cooking, you're going to ruin your food and burn it. And that also serves as a transition period between work to having dinner with my wife. And our daughter is only 4 months old, but see her for a little bit, and dance and talk. But if I was still so focused on all my stressors of my various businesses and books and everything, I couldn't be present at dinner. So I need something like that walk in nature and then cooking dinner to clear my mind, to focus on spending some time with others. So that kind of intentionality, I think, is critically important to shift our mindset. Um, I'll get that same thought, say, in high intensity workouts, also with noise canceling headset, when you're working out so hard that you literally cannot have a thought. And then as you're catching your breath, all of a sudden something clicks in your mind. You go, holy shit, right? I've been working on this problem for a long time, and what a time for it to resolve as I'm gasping, for air on the ground. So those are what I call my meditations. These intentional acts that force myself into a state of not thinking about anything but the task.
Yeah, I think it was French philosopher Pascal in the late 1700s said that all of humanity's problems will stem from a man's inability to sit in his quiet thoughts alone. And I think he gave a great, diagnosis and example there of even when it comes to meditative practices, like we're looking for the app or like the hack to get there. And it's like we're overthinking, overanalyzing what should be a peaceful, natural occurrence in our everyday life. Something as simple as stepping outside in nature for 15, 20 minutes can be more beneficial than trying to sit there with headphones on and you got the audio music playing and you're over analyzing thinking. And I can't tell you how many guys I've tried to lead down the path of meditative practices, and it's like they're well, what's the app that you use? What's it fix? And it's like just go outside and touch a tree and see what that does for you.
Absolutely. Um, and I read about a lot about this. Like, people avoid introspection, right? It's the most painful thing that people,
Mm-hmm.
but it's the most important thing you need to do. And there's been research that you put people in a room with nothing to stimulate them except a device that they can deliver themselves shock, painful shock. And the vast majority of people would rather repeatedly shock themselves than to sit alone with their thoughts and contemplate on who they are. And I think that's very telling. And in what I'm writing on the second book, The Stone Wall, right, on human nature, power, and the failures of justice, we cannot understand others unless we understand ourselves, right? And we have to understand all parts and components of ourselves. And then we can go about understanding others. And then we can go about understanding personal dynamics between people. And we have to continue, and all of these changes, the psychology changes at different levels. Um, and you know, then we can slowly start realizing what's going on in society, on a macro level. And you have to start with the components at the micro level. And that really starts with yourself and understanding yourself. And then you slowly work outwards. Um, and in this book, what I'm doing is I'm using these alchemical inversions where I'm taking polar opposite thinkers at either extreme and I'm smashing their ideas together and finding the shared observations and truths and saying, like, well, this like militant man-hating feminist and this toxic misanthrope from the turn of the 1903 um, actually agree on a lot. They just attribute fault differently. And one's a female perspective, one's a male's perspective, with no understanding of the other side and just only kind of blame. But they're actually observing mostly the same things about what's going on in society. And we need to do this, to understand all of these anxieties and stressors. Um, and the deck is stacked against us, like you mentioned, with how we're manipulated with finance, with TV, with social media, with AI. They're all insidious and they're driving us apart. And we're getting to this place where we can't even agree on what is reality,
Mm.
right? Like, and everyone's reality is different. Like what I see as green might be your red and vice versa, right? In your mind's eye. But so long as we can agree that the grass is green and blood is red, then we can have a conversation. And with how all of these tools of manipulation are working, we're at a point where we can't really agree on these things anymore. And then we just think that the other side is insane or evil. And you can't have a conversation at that point.
How do we use these tools? You've mentioned we've evolved through these stressors, but a lot of these stressors that we're touching on in this conversation are only present in human societies over the last 15, 20 years, 3 decades tops, right? With the advent of the internet and accessibility of information. Our
Yeah.
ancestors didn't know what was happening on the other side of the world. They knew what was
No.
happening in the 100 to 200 people that were a part of their tribe. So I think that there's a hijacking of our physiology because we're paying attention to too much externally. So,
Absolutely, and they go together, right? And I know we're going off on big tangents, which we thought might happen, but to loop it back into hydrogen, and cold and heat and fasting and exercise and all these things, um, there is no like duality between our body and mind. We know that now from a scientific perspective. Our health drives our neurochemistry.
mm,
Our physical health plays a massive role. We cannot think clearly if we are flooded with inflammation, and our body's dysregulated. And we need physical health to have mental strength and mental health. And all of these physical tools, which none of them are hacks, they're all intentional struggles that we need to learn to utilize for ourselves as individuals. Those allow us to get strong in our body, which can correct a lot of issues with our mind. But our mind isn't going to be strong unless we then protect our mind with knowledge and introspection and philosophy and understanding
mhm.
and endeavor to do that. And if either is weak, we risk the other side derailing and becoming weaker and weaker. So we need to pursue mind and body. And yeah, you're absolutely right. I'd say the real start of all of this started with kind of industrialized education, and turning everyone into basically factory workers and stopping teaching critical and analytical thinking. We're taught to regurgitate what we're told, punished for questioning things now.
Mhm.
Um, and then a lot of propaganda started, especially after World War II, and during the Cold War and everything like that. That played a big role. Science itself became privatized starting after World War II. People think the scientific paradigm has always been like that. It hasn't. Science used to be disseminated by not-for-profit societies of learned intellectuals, which were like supported by the academic institutions. There was no private funding in there. The history of how academia turned to this private enterprise is horrifying, and it basically started in the late 1950s, which is also when this single molecule, single receptor, currently prevailing um, theory on like disease management came from. The late 50s, the same time that publication of information became privatized. And this single molecule to single pathway receptor is also coincidentally patentable and can be owned, right? Very good for business. Now, some of these drugs do work. They do have purposes. Some of them are harmful, but our entire perception of what is empirical has been derailed with private interests over the last 70 years or so. um, and it's gotten to this point where it's now there's so much conflict because the majority of pharma and the majority of academic publishing are both managed by the same three asset management firms. So how can you have any impartiality there from an
Mhm.
editorial perspective or anything? So we really need to think what's empirical, and the answer isn't to say science is let's not trust science. Is to say we need to improve science and we need to improve the dissemination of knowledge because when the jets are crashing in the air, we don't say let's go to magic carpets. We want to improve the airline industry, and that goes for science too. So all of these tools, whether it's hydrogen, whether it's cold exercise, proper diet, these are tools that help not just your body but will help your mind. But then you need to also strengthen your mind at the same time, because we're fighting a war right now. And we think we're fighting it with each other, but we're really being used as pawns against each other from those who are attacking us, which are those in the positions of power at the top. And that's just human nature. Everyone wants to do what's best for them. And those in power are going to want to perpetuate their own power and expand their own power. And we're now in a system where not only is it human nature, but the law often not only protects but demands it out of them, that they have to behave in this way. So that is what we need to be growing stronger for, is to realize who the real enemy we're fighting is, to realize how we're being turned against each other, to realize why we are being driven to be weaker in mind and body every day, and to resist it. And in that, like all of these things, every one of them are just a small piece of the puzzle. There is no magic pill or bullet in
Mhm.
any of them. It's the accumulation of all of these strategies for your body and your mind that will make you whole.
Yeah. And I'd love to, pivot here a little bit and get into the hydrogen application and uses to help give the audience some tangible takeaways to strengthen mind, strengthen body, based on all the things that we've shared here. Everybody's going to be listening, watching this right now, the focus on strength training, right? We've done a lot of episodes on strength training. We've done a lot of episodes on nutrition. We've, had the cold plunge conversation, the sleep discussion. So for someone that's out there that's listening and wants to maybe begin to integrate the hydrogen tablets, where's the best place to start? And are there specific, populations or conditions that we're seeing the most impact in? Is it athletes? Is it men that are struggling with inflammation? Is it an older population? Is it those with declining cognitive health? So let's get kind of more into the application use of hydrogen.
With the hydrogen tablets, I'll just get started. Hydrogen is like any other intervention. It works on like a dose or duration, like concentration, like whether it's a stress or a direct molecule. If you do one dumbbell curl, it's not going to be an exercise, right? If you take 1/100th of an Advil, it's not going to reduce your pain and inflammation in any way. Same thing, all hydrogen water is not equal, right? All hydrogen devices are not equal. Some of them range up to 500, 1,000 times difference in dose in what you're getting. With the tablets, we get by a landslide the highest concentration and dose of any technology in the world. Um, we have more clinical research than every other commercial hydrogen product combined on the tablets. Um, our expert committee needs to reconvene, but as of a couple years ago, and we have multiple clinical trials published since then, we had 21 validated structure function claims to FTC and FDA standards. We'll probably get 5 or 6 more. These span metabolic health, exercise performance, brain health, microbiome health, um, you know, uh, you know, cardiovascular health. We've shown to regulate inflammatory response and redox status. So it's not an antioxidant. A lot of companies claim it's an antioxidant. It actually is able to regulate our own antioxidant response by the NRF2 keep one pathway, right? What that means is it works like exercise. It's a slight raise in stress that triggers our body to respond and promote something called redox homeostasis, because reductive stress is just as damaging, and that's too many antioxidants. It's just as damaging as excess oxidative stress. And there's a reason why I say athletes don't take antioxidants alongside training, because taking direct antioxidants alongside training is going to blunt the hypertrophy gains that you get from the stress adaptation of exercise. Um, Really interesting research on hydrogen has shown that when you take hydrogen while training, say rats on a first swim test, it actually increases the acute stress response during the exercise at a cellular level. So it's increasing the oxidative stress and the inflammation, but they're returning to homeostasis faster in the hydrogen group than the exercise alone group, which means it's like you exercise harder and recover quicker. But at the same time, on a whole organism level, right, your whole physiology, hydrogen showing an anti-fatigue effect. So the cell is getting more stressed out with hydrogen than exercise alone, but the body is undergoing less stress. So there's research showing lower submaximal heart rates while you're pulling in the same oxygen on VO2 max stress tests. There's systematic reviews and meta-analyses showing anti-fatigue effects. You're doing more reps. In our research, well, the lower submaximal heart rate is one of our trials, but we just recently showed in elite female athletes, so like Russian Olympic level athletes, females, and in 28 days we improved body composition, which is unheard of. At an international athlete, they lost a little fat, gained a little muscle, but it completely blunted their rise in creatine kinase, right, a marker of muscle damage. At the same time, it increased their peak torque on leg extension, and more significantly after they'd exercised, showing the anti-fatigue effect. That was 28 days, 2 tablets a day. There was another trial, and I was an author on both of these. There was another trial in a completely opposite group. These people were 50 plus with no adult exercise experience, exercise uninitiated. So they'd made it to 50 and they'd never worked out since childhood. Very unhealthy, had to start practitioner guided, like supervised exercise protocols to improve their health. The placebo group, this was 6-week double-blind RCT, and we presented this one at ESPN in Milan a little over a year ago. I was there presenting. So in this trial, the placebo group had borderline rhabdomyolysis, right? They had a 700% increase in creatine kinase and 1100% increase in myoglobin. The hydrogen tablet group had no significant increase in either creatine kinase or myoglobin, so no muscle damage. right? It also regulated the cortisol response, showing better stress adaptation. It increased free testosterone and DHEA as well in the hydrogen group. So we absolutely, with the tablets, are showing decent evidence, and there's systematic reviews and meta-analyses that hydrogen can help, whether you're a pro athlete or you are just starting your exercise journey. And likely it's going to help more if you're just starting your exercise journey, to get through that initial acute trauma and stress of starting exercise. But for pro athletes, they're probably some of the earliest adopters, because if they can gain like less than 1%, even, that is a big difference to them. Any bump helps, at that level. Um, we additionally, we have a number of clinical trials, I think 7 or so now, that show improvements in body composition, and metabolic health. We've shown to regulate both ghrelin and GLP-1 and affect the neurochemistry involved in satiety, right? Which leads people to, healthier decisions on eating. So this isn't like an Ozempic or something like that, where it's throttling GLP-1. Actually, in rats, we showed the opposite. So what happens with GLP-1 is similar to insulin. When you're first inducing obesity, your body overreacts trying to full throttle GLP-1 to stop you from eating so much. That eventually breaks, like there's a feedback loop, it breaks, and now you can't reuse GLP-1, after eating, and it just stays chronically low. So we, in rats, attenuated the rise in GLP-1, so it stayed at a normal rise, but the rats actually resisted weight gain, whereas the non-hydrogen rats, even with the higher GLP-1, they got obese. The hydrogen rats didn't get obese. But in humans, in chronically obese people, we restored their ability to produce GLP-1. So it significantly increased their GLP-1. And then with ghrelin, people think of ghrelin as like the hunger hormone, but that's a limited understanding. Yes, it does drive hunger, but we want that. And it also drives glucose homeostasis, insulin response. It has neuroprotective effects. What you'll see in a person with a healthy metabolism is when they're fasted, they have high ghrelin telling them to eat. After they eat, it plummets to nothing. And you want that peak in the valley. In overweight and obese people, you see this static level where it's always kind of halfway between. And that's why they think, oh, well, I don't eat big meals, but they're always snacking, right? They're always a little bit hungry, grabbing that chocolate bar, getting a little bit more sugar, right? They're always kind of snacky throughout the day. So the calories add up. So in an obese population, we restored this peak and valley in the ghrelin. And that is what hydrogen is doing. It's not a drug, it's not like affecting a single pathway or an agonist or an antagonist on a single receptor. It's working like exercise, like lifestyle interventions, and it's slowly restoring our body's ability to operate as intended and function as intended.
For the general population person looking to utilize hydrogen for body composition, reduction in inflammation, some of the other benefits that you were just explaining there, you gave the one example of it being utilized intra-workout. Outside of taking it intra-workout, does timing play a critical part in how the effectiveness is going to be?
In the sense that an empty stomach is important. So I have that. I have intellectual property. I've demonstrated the ability to turn various molecules like fibers and some others into like dense foams and gels, which stabilize hydrogen. So with hydrogen, just like with an exercise or cold, you want like a stress spike. You don't want like a slow leak of hydrogen gas throughout the day. You want this flood, probably to mimic, when we're starving to death and we're just shoving our face with as much plant-based food as we could get in our hunter-gatherer days. So you want this spike of H2. So I would say do not drink it um, after eating. You want to drink it on an empty stomach. So some of the times that I like doing it is first thing in the morning, right, on an empty stomach. I'll do it right before I exercise. Sometimes if I'm really run down, I'll do like mid afternoon, a few hours. So if you like, your stomach doesn't have to be like totally empty. Like maybe wait like 2 hours, or if you just had protein, it's fine. But if you have carbohydrates, I'd wait a couple hours.
Yeah. And is there any benefit in stacking it with these other stressors? So my protocol, and I've used the H2 tabs, which I think is using your product, is early morning. So I have sauna cold plunge. It's something I've, you know, religiously done for almost 2 years. So it's like wake, little bit of, meditative time, sauna cold plunge. And then I started because I heard about the hydrogen tablets through Brecca, got those and I would stack them in the morning. So first thing, hydrate, hydrogen, sauna, cold plunge, boom, 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 boom. And I've noticed like just not a massive spike in energy. Like I wake up pretty energized anyways, but like a more clean drive and focus and being able to taper off of caffeine, like not completely, but the need for as much.
So we have two clinical trials on this, head to head against caffeine, right? The one, both of them are on young, healthy participants after 24-hour sleep deprivation. So hydrogen and caffeine showed equivalence in increasing something called the attention network test. And interestingly, they affected different domains of alertness or of attention. Caffeine affects alerting. That's what makes you wired and locked in, and you can feel it. You're high. It throttles you. Hydrogen affected something called orienting, which is more that calm clarity that you're likely noticing. So then we did a second clinical trial, and this was a quadruple crossover um, with putting everyone under like fMRI to study what was going on in the brain. And so we had like four groups: placebo, placebo, and then we had hydrogen plus placebo, and then we had caffeine plus placebo, and then we had hydrogen plus caffeine. And every person did every group in a washout, right? So it really strengthened the study in this crossover design, quadruple crossover. And what we found is the hydrogen groups with or without caffeine had a substantially more robust improvement in brain metabolism in more regions in the brain. And it was showing like caffeine, yes, it throttles you on the stimulant effect, but hydrogen is just returning the brain to normal function. So if you wake up a little groggy, or if you're jet lagged, or you're getting a little tired in the afternoon, it's not a stimulant that's going to keep you up. It's returning your brain as if you weren't tired. And that's why it's a lot more subtle, right? Because we notice something that makes us high a lot more easily than we notice a return to normalcy. And that's how hydrogen works in every avenue. And we've got testimonials like people will say things like, yeah, I didn't think it was working, and then I stopped and I realized like a pain came back, or a problem came back that just slowly disappeared. Like maybe like your hip is clicking or your neck is tight or something, and you start the hydrogen and you don't notice it's gone because you just feel normal, and then you stop and all of a sudden the problem comes back.
Now, because you compared it to exercise earlier, is it similar in the way where like the longer you use it, the more you'll experience the benefits?
Yeah, so the research is stronger in longer term studies. Our strongest studies are 6 months use, not like a week's use. Now, just like exercise, I think we need more research on say like washouts and changing protocols and everything like that. Um, Timing, dosing. Like if you do the exact same workout every day for 30 years, it ceases to be exercise, right? Um, so I have that thought with hydrogen. So and we don't have the data on this yet, but just from like a mechanistic standpoint, I look at it this way: every 6 months or so, I'll stop taking hydrogen for like a week, and I'll let my body freeze back up. We didn't get into my story, but really short. When I was 29, I got like a mystery virus which triggered an autoimmune response. I was fitness was my life back then. I was training like 6 hours a day, 6 times a week. I was competing in CrossFit. I was training martial arts hours a day. And it wrecked me. I had, central nervous system fatigue. I had sudden onset narcolepsy. My C-reactive proteins were 34 milligrams a liter, so like 100 times abnormal. And that lasted a couple months. When the dust settled, I had polyarthritis. I had osteoarthritis in 11 joints. So my left shoulder is my worst. It's bone on bone right now. This is as far as it goes, right? Um, with the hydrogen, I don't do cortisone injections. I don't take anti-inflammatories. Maybe acutely if I throw my back out or something like that, because I'm putting off, you know, back surgery because my discs are pretty bad at this point. But hydrogen lets me exercise. I kickbox 3 times a week. I lift weights twice a week. Right. Happy with what I can do at 40 years old. That's for sure. With the damage I have, it's not magic. It hasn't regrown any of my joints and cartilage and completely repaired me. But when I wash out for a week, then I can't put on my socks and I can't put on a jacket, right? And I just completely freeze. So I do that every 6 months to let my body go, shit, the hydrogen is gone. And then maybe I go from first thing in the morning to, I work out typically every day at 1 p.m., from 1 to 2 p.m., like 5 times a week. Um, so I'll take it at like 12:30 instead. And I just change it. Or maybe I'll do it twice. I'll do it before I work out, and then I'll do a few hours after I work out, in a late afternoon, pick me up. So I just rotate through protocols, just to keep my body guessing. And there isn't like published evidence on this. It's just speculative with how other forms of stress works and how we become accustomed to them.
Yeah, and it makes a lot of sense. Um, Last few here, we'll wrap it up. I really appreciate all the time. We definitely went into some areas of the conversation that I wasn't planning on, but I've really, really enjoyed it. You mentioned earlier you believe that wearable technology is really going to be the future of health and wellness. Where do you see hydrogen therapy playing a role in that as well in the future 5 to 10 years?
Yeah. So I think we're going to have a really good idea of when we should take hydrogen, when we're getting these stress spikes. And what I tell people, it's really bro science. Everyone asks me for a protocol on hydrogen. I say, well, it seems the more damaged you are, the more you need combined with body weight. So it's really guesswork. But I never want someone to take more than they need. So I'll say start with a tablet, maybe 2 tablets a day, and scale it until you don't see any more benefits. Make sure that you're taking it properly, right? Make sure you follow proper instructions. I like putting 1 tablet in at least 330 milliliters of water to half a liter of water, so 12 to 17 ounce range. It works best in room temperature water, so you want it like probably 70, 75, degrees, um, maybe 18 to 25 Celsius for people on metric. Uh, so it's probably up to high 70s, but anyways, that's where the tablet reacts and retains H2 the best. And then you want to chug it. So you don't want to sip it, and take it over 15, 20 minutes. You want, as soon as that tablet pops to the surface, you slam it back. And that's the difference in, say, if you're looking at it from an exercise perspective of doing a bicep workout over 3 hours, if you're like sipping on the water throughout half an hour or an hour, or like hammering a hit training and being exhausted on the ground after like 30 minutes or 20 minutes. So you want to slam that, spike your cellular concentration, and that's where you get the adaptation.
Yeah. And last one, and then we'll wrap up with our final question. I mentioned before our work is in the addiction recovery space. Just curious if you see hydrogen playing any role in mental health or even addiction recovery.
Yeah, I do. I can't get more into it. There's uh, a grant that we're working with someone to go in on basically opioid and veterans. So we had to look into the research to see if it was. applied. I don't know if that's going to go through. I don't know if that research is going to start, so I can't talk too much about it. But myself and my team, we did a deep dive into it, and we found a lot of what I'll say plausibility. So not direct evidence, but plausibility in basically certain actions that hydrogen does, effects it has on the brain, could potentially assist in this, but we do need to study it. Now, there is some research on hydrogen helping with, say, methamphetamines and alcohol, both in rodents and humans, but it's nascent, it's embryonic. So it's not huge trials. It's an area that I want to see more study in, absolutely. And it's an area that I find interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And I'd love to stay in touch just offline with you. Obviously, you have a lot of work coming down the pipeline. Maybe have you back on when some of these later books are published, and something for me to keep an eye on there as well with the research. And maybe we can circle back if that does get explored a little bit deeper. So, Alex, man, tell the audience, tell the guys where they can connect with you, where the books are going to be available, and even getting into some of the tablets. I know it's all available on your website, but just point them in the best direction.
Yeah. So alextarnava.com, I'll be housing my books. So all my books will be free of charge as a PDF and audio. So the audio and Stress Hacked will probably come out mid-October. The PDF I'll have online within a day or two of right now. So it's October 1st right now. I'll have it on my website. On Amazon, it's going to run through a not-for-profit, so every cent will be going into advertising for the book. It'll be set as the lowest price they allow for Kindle, Audible, and hard copies. On social media, I'm just at Alex Tarnava. I have not been that active myself, but what I do is I do post new research. I will be posting stuff on my books. Now that my books are coming out, uh, you'll see, like, say, quotes and passages from the book. I might narrate them myself. Um, I do have a narrator who isn't me narrating these books. He's if I recall, he might have retired by now. He was going to retire, but active duty officer in the Air Force. Is doing narration throughout my books. But so that my voice and emotion comes through in specific quotes and passages, I'll be doing select narration as well that I'll be putting out there.
Yeah, incredible. And guys, we'll have all the links and socials and where to find the books and all the PDFs plugged down there in the show notes. Last and final question. We end every show here with the same question. The title of our podcast is called The Superhuman Life. So, Alex, as we break today's conversation, how would you define living a superhuman life?
I think that everyone needs to look internally on what that means for them. And for me, it means constant struggle and improvement, right? And to be the best person I can be, and to compare that against my potential and what I think is possible with me, not what someone else is. And I look at that much like I look at society. Um, Everyone has different skills. None of us can be the best at every single thing. So we need to be the best we can be.
Amen to that. Guys, Alex Tarnava, really hope you enjoyed this one. If you are getting value out of these conversations, want to continue to support us, ratings, reviews, and most importantly, sharing this with as many people as possible. But we love you guys. Check out the books, check out the hydrogen tabs, link down there in the show notes below. Until next time, we'll see you guys. We love you. Have a good one.